All right, we're live. This is my very first stream of all time. So hope everybody is sending good vibes my way. Um, if anybody is out there and wants to write in the chat words of wisdom, happiness, love, uh, they're more than welcome. Please send them my way. Um, Today, we're going to be looking into moving a couple of projects that I've been helping out with over to from Travis to Azure Pipelines. Um, I don't know if everybody is aware of what happened to Travis, but sad story, especially since they're based in Berlin, like me. They were bought by a VC firm and then basically gutted. So it's not looking good for the future of Travis. So I think a lot of projects have been moving over to Azure Pipelines from Travis and to other providers out there. So we're going to do the same for a couple of projects that I've been working on. And I got my first message in chat, which is a huge relief. This works. That's good to know. Yeah. By the way, chat, if anything is not working as far as audio or video or anything like that, just let me know. I'm using this as a test stream, so definitely want to make sure that everything looks and sounds good. Cool. So the two projects that we're going to be looking at are Pete here and Druid. There are two projects in Rust that I've been working on, and we'll take a look at what they do in a second. I want to give a shout out to Rafe Levine, who started both of these projects and who has let me help out with them. So thanks, Rafe. Yeah, we're just going to go ahead and try and we'll take a look at the projects first, and then we'll try and move them over from Travis to Azure Pipelines and see what happens. Cool. So right over in here, you can see I'm inside of Pete here, and what Pete is 2D graphics abstraction. So basically, what it allows you to do is draw things to a canvas of some sort, and it abstracts away kind of the backing thing that actually really does the drawing. So for instance, there's currently three backends. One of them is Cairo, which if you're unaware is a kind of cross-platform open source drawing library. Then there's Direct2D, which is kind of the de facto drawing library on Windows or for Windows operating system. And then there's a canvas-based web one, so you can draw directly to the canvas. And of course, there's going to be more of these in the future with backends like Core Graphics on Mac, SVG, things like that. So if you want to write drawing code, you can write it once in Rust and then choose the backend that actually really does the drawing. The reason that this exists is for Druid, the second project here. And Druid is basically like a UI library, fairly low level UI library for doing cross-platform UIs of any sort. And the reason that Rafe started this project here was basically so that he could write a couple of apps and have them work everywhere and do it in Rust. So like these kinds of things exist in other languages and stuff like that. But the cool thing about it is Rust is really low level. So just like C or C++, it's pretty portable. You don't have to worry about a huge runtime and stuff like that. And so, you might have heard of toolkits like this in those other low-level languages. It's kind of the same idea here. Druid here uses Pete to actually do the drawing. So like when it's on Windows, it will use the Direct2D backend for Pete to do drawing. And of course, eventually, like on Mac, it will use the Core Graphics one. For now, it's using Cairo, since we haven't implemented the Core Graphics backend for Pete, but we're going to eventually move that way. So if you have any questions about what these projects do, I'm going to go ahead and just run a demo real quick so people can see. If I do cargo run dash dash dash, oh, I cannot type, dash dash example, and then calc, it runs like this calculator app. And we haven't hooked up everything to like listen for mouse movements and stuff like that yet. There's a pull request open for that, but like if you click, like it doesn't really do anything, but you can tell it like knows where in the window it was clicked and stuff like that. So still very early days, but like this drawing, if you were to run it on Windows, it would use Direct2D to draw to the window there. But you would basically see a very similar thing show up there. But the code for this calculator was written once, and can run in both places. Cool. So if you have any questions about that, let me know. But I guess we'll kind of get started with the actual purpose of this stream, and that is to move these projects over to Azure Pipelines. So I think we'll probably start with Druid first, even though it's like higher level thing. It actually is a bit easier to test. The Travis YAML that it has right now is like super simple. So here it is. It's pretty easy. We just have Rust, stable and nightly compilers, and we're only testing on Windows for now. In this, I'd like to eventually move to also testing Mac OS if possible. So we'll see if we can fit that in. It shouldn't be too hard. I actually added Mac OS to the Travis one. We never merged it because we knew we were just going to move to Travis Pipelines. So to Azure Pipelines. So it's like one line of code basically to do that. And yeah, other than that, like all it really does is just run cargo check, which does type checking and stuff like that, but doesn't build a binary. It checks all the code, excuse me, all the code, all the examples, then runs cargo test on everything basically. Yeah, cool. So the next thing that I did, like when I first started looking into pipelines, because I'm rather new to pipelines actually, like most of my experience in the past has been with Travis. Like I found this handy documentation here on moving over. And it's basically like migrating from Travis to Azure Pipelines, and it goes through basically all of the differences and stuff like that. So you can search through here. I don't know, maybe I can post it into the chat, like the link and stuff like that, for you to look at. Yeah, so we can kind of use this as a way to go. The second thing that we'll be looking at is I've been helping out with moving Tokyo, which is a big Rust project that much more complicated than Pete or Druid are. Helping them move from Travis over to Azure Pipelines recently, and so we'll kind of cheat off of that. I think that will help smooth things along. And the last thing that I did before this was go basically Googled Azure Pipelines, went in, set up like a project there, and that's it. So we're like haven't done very much. So we're gonna try. All good. If you have any questions, just let me know. But other than that, we're just gonna get started. Cool. So I guess maybe the first thing to do is have a new branch. We'll just do pipelines. And then maybe we can just create like an Azure Pipelines.yaml. And I'll go ahead and open up in VS Code now. Been using VS Code a lot lately, actually, which has been really cool. Like I have my background in editors is really with Vim mostly. So I have like a Vim plugin for code, and it's been working pretty nicely. And the support for Rust is also pretty good. The support for Rust in every IDE is still fairly early days, because it is a relatively young language, but it works most of the time. And if not, like maybe once a day or something, I have to like close the window and reopen it to kind of get out of a stuck state or something. But yeah, that's been good. So So now we just have our empty YAML file, and the question is like, what do we do first here? So bit and bang. Hello, how you doing? Welcome. So would you say there's anything missing, or were you hoping to see but didn't find with it? Do you mean, yeah, with Rust and VS Code? I think it's like the VS Code support. It's not really anything to do with VS Code. There's a Rust language server that basically just speaks the VS Code, Visual Studio language server protocol, basically. And like I said, it works most of the time, but I think it's not incredibly robust. So, and Rust is quite a powerful type system. So like there's a lot going on, and the compiler does a lot of things and things like that. So every once in a while it just gets in a state where it's kind of like confused, and gets stuck in that state. And I don't think that's VS Code's issue. I think that's more the Rust language server issue. They need to figure out how to make it a bit more robust. But they're like, I think VS Code is becoming kind of the de facto editor for Rust, which is really cool to see. Of course, people also use like Emacs and Vim and stuff like that. And I know JetBrains has good support with their CLion editor as well. But most people online that I see, even people like me who like typically have used Vim and stuff before, have been using VS Code a lot. So it's pretty cool to see. Cool. So like one big thing with difference between Travis and Azure Pipelines is like the language support. So it's a little bit unfortunate for Rust that like there's not just this one line of code or one line of YAML configuration that you can put in and say like language is Rust, like you could with Travis. You kind of have to install Rust manually, which is not a big deal. It's like basically three lines of a shell script, but we have to set that up. And in fact, what I've seen before happen here is like in Tokyo, for instance, they have this as a separate script. Where is it? Let's see. Yeah, here, install Rust. And we can probably steal this and use it. It works pretty well. Yeah, it's basically just installing like the same setup for Linux and Mac OS, since they're the same. And then there's like a slightly different one for Windows. And then it kind of does a little bit of a check down here to make sure like everything has worked out properly. And so I think we'll just go ahead and steal this, even though maybe it's like a bit overkill for what we're actually doing. Like, I think we can just go ahead and do it for now, and then we can clean up later. So I'm just gonna like literally steal this. And I've been seeing a lot lately, like if you have complicated builds or builds with like multiple steps, like people have been breaking it up into a different folder that you can call into, and like that all just kind of works by default. So you can call it, I think, whatever you want. I like the idea of calling it CI, so maybe we just do that. By the way, like I said, I'm pretty new to pipelines, so if you out there, dear listener, have more experience with pipelines, feel free to let me know what you've done in the past and how it's worked with you, and then we can kind of do this together. Like, by no means is this meant to be Ryan knows best. Let me show you how it's done. That's definitely not what this is about. So cool. So yeah, we'll go ahead and create that. We have our CI here. Let me just we can call this like install rust.yaml and just paste it in like this. Let me give us a bit more room here so we can see it. And basically what we're doing here is just calling this shell script that installs Rust up, which is a version manager for Rust, similar to like MVM from the Node world. So it allows you to like install different versions of the compiler, and it allows you to add new targets and things like that for different architectures and stuff. And once you get that, you get cargo, which you can see us using down here. And cargo is the build tool, kind of like npm, I guess, in the Node world. So it helps with dependencies and building things. And rustc is the actual compiler. So if you can just use rustc to like straight up compile something, but typically we're going to use cargo because it's a lot easier to use. So now that we have that, we should be good to go there. And then we can come back into the Tokyo one to see kind of how it's being used here. So you can see like we're just kind of gonna start with like a jobs key here. Oops. And then we'll list out our different jobs. So like basically the way that the pipelines works is you have kind of a list of jobs, and then it will run those jobs, and those jobs are kind of what show up top level of your UI, and also kind of top level of the UI inside of your GitHub pull request. So when you look at it and you want to see like, does everything pass? Like if you have multiple jobs at the top level, then you'll have multiple kind of like pass or fail badges. Which is different than my experience with Travis before. But cool. So you can see here, like, I think we're not installing Rust at the top level here. We're instead kind of calling into these other things, but I think we will install Rust ourselves at the top level. And you can see, like, if we look for the first template here, this Rust format one here, you can see that they're calling let's see, yeah, they're calling this template here, which actually installs Rust. So I think we're gonna kind of take this and put it to the top level. So we'll just go ahead and do jobs, and then job. And then I think we like basically after that we need a steps, and these are kind of the sub things that we can do here. And instead of like writing out the steps ourselves, we can just go ahead and call a template, which we already have this this install Rust template that we have. So we'll just call that template. And I think we used a different name. Let me go back and do that. We used a different name here for it than Tokyo did. They called it Azure Install Rust. We just called it Install Rust. So we can just go ahead and do install rust.yaml. And you know, to be perfectly honest, I'm not exactly sure how it knows where to go in. I think we have to do CI/ here, but we'll find out. So that it knows to look inside of the CI folder. And then like we have a couple of parameters in here. You can tell like it's basically wants to know which version of Rust to install. I believe we can just go ahead and say in here, as you can see here, like we pass those in. Where is it? Yeah, we pass it in using this parameters map here, like this. So like they're passing in a specific version of Rust 1.32.0, and I think that was in order to avoid a couple of things that we don't really need to avoid. I think we can just go ahead and say Rust version stable, and this will just pick the like latest stable version of Rust, whatever that happens to be at the time. And I think it's like, I think 1.134 or something like that was released yesterday, so it'll probably end up being that. And that's it. I think like this will basically go ahead and be our one job. It will install Rust, and if it passes, then our whole build passes. So maybe we can just go ahead and do that. I think the last thing that maybe we want to do before we try it out is to go ahead and basically do what they're doing here, where we scope this to a specific PR, namely master, so that it knows to only run outside of master. I think otherwise, like it will always run, and maybe that's not what we want. So we'll just go ahead and do that for now. And we'll see what happens. All right. So does anybody see any issues with my YAML file, especially syntax? Because YAML is very finicky. So we want to make sure that our syntax looks good. And I think it looks good, but I'm probably wrong. So let's go ahead and see if we can actually run this. I think we like the first thing that we have to do is connect kind of where this thing is going to run and the actual repo that we have here. This part I've never done before, so I'm kind of curious to see how it actually turns out and how easy it is. So I mean, I don't know. Let's see if we can build a new pipeline. Where is your code? GitHub. Well, let's see what happens here. Oh, and I think it's going to search through all my repositories now. Hopefully I have permissions. If not, this stream has ended early. Haha, no, it's the fork. I think I might not have permissions to actually run this on the actual one, which is fine. We can just run it on the fork for now. And then once we know that it works and stuff like that, we can get permissions from Rafe to go ahead. Yeah, so I'm gonna just go ahead and push it to the fork and test from there. So hopefully I have permissions to my own fork. So it's interesting. Can I just like say no, none? I'm gonna do it, or does it want me to start a minimal pipeline that you must? Interesting. I wonder if there's any way to like say I'm gonna provide this person. Don't worry. Let's start with this and see what happens. Oh, interesting. Yeah, this is cool. Oh yeah, one thing we didn't do was define a pool that we wanted to run in, which I think we have to do here. And I think we should do that like at the top level. But this will change at some point because we want to run it on multiple VMs. Like we want to run Linux, OS 10 and Windows. But for now, I think we're going to want to go ahead and do that. Yeah, I don't know. Save and run. Interesting. It's weird that it wants to do that. Why can't I just like say, no, I'm going to do this? Maybe I can. I don't know. We'll see. I'm just going to like go away now. Was that a bad decision? Looks like that was a bad decision. Oh boy. Let's try that one more time. And it looks like chat is saying you can scroll down and ignore it. Although I'm not seeing that option. All right, whatever. Let's create a new. On this screen, do you mean? That we can dismiss? Okay, and there's no way to go back. Well, I'm just gonna do it. Like we've created a branch now called Azure Pipelines. I think that's different than what we have here, but that's fine. We can just do branch m Azure Pipelines. And see what happens. I wonder, is it gonna create that inside of got to go to my. Yeah, that was definitely a case of them trying to be very helpful, but I didn't really want the help. So cool. So they've started this for me. I'm gonna go ahead and like stash here. Oh yeah. Let's do. What's the best way to do this? Whatever. I'm just going to, you know what? I'm going to create a new branch. Because why not? And we'll see how this goes. Oops. Initial pipelines. Yeah, now we unfortunately have two pipelines branches there, but that's fine. And then this should eventually show up here. One thing I should probably do is like git merge. I need to get, like, my local copy is probably incredibly old. Git pull upstream. Maybe not. Okay. Git check out. Yeah, I could merge pipelines into Azure Pipelines, but there's really no point. I mean, it should run for each of the PRs that are going to be pointed to master. The thing that I need to do is merge master into this. Okay, good. So we're up to date then. Oh yeah, because I had master pointed to upstream master, so it wasn't out of date, which is good to know. Surprised to see that there's no would even open a pull request for me. How incredibly helpful. I want mine though. Oh, I'm in Druid. That's why. Oh man. Did I create this in Druid? I'm all turned around now. I did. Okay, that's fine. So the problem was we set up pipelines for Pete when we were working in Druid, and that's not helpful. So we can go back and basically start this process over again, this time for Druid, and go ahead and see basically how things work there. I think we should just go to the very top level again and create a new project. We'll call it Druid. Make it public. Yeah, and this time we'll take a closer look and see if we can skip creating that like bogus pipelines thing. Cool. So new pipeline. It's in GitHub. And then now we want Druid. Okay. This was the screen that was meant. We're on the configure. Ah, gotcha. So it was that one. I was reading that like 3 times and I thought, for some reason, I thought something else. Okay, so this is, we've already pushed. So it should be pipelines and then it's Azure. Was it underscore? Nope. cool. Azure Pipelines.yaml. File not found. It is found. All right, cool. Yeah, let's see what the heck happens here when we run it. And then once we get started, then we have a bunch of, then it will fail and we can basically work through the issues then. And this is good. This is what I've been experiencing a lot with working with YAML basically. Is I guess it's whenever you're working with something that's kind of very loosely defined and you don't know the schema that well, but I'm always getting these basically unexpected values because I put something at a level that I should not have put it at. So basically it was saying like, I don't know what jobs is, which is fine. So we'll figure out what needs to be there instead. And I mean, like I said, I'm basically cheating the entire time. Yeah, there it was. Yeah, so it's weird that here, and this is their top level one, they have a top level jobs and it seems to be working fine. I wonder if it's because we put pool there. Wonder if we even need pool. It looks like there aren't any. Well, there's this job here. This should be, and this is all one job then. Oh, you mean in Tokyo? Okay. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. Although I'm pretty sure that template can stand in for job and it can stand in for step. So we can do either one, because basically what we want to do is have a job here that consists of multiple steps, the first step of which being install Rust. And then after we've installed Rust, we're gonna have another step that says run cargo test or something like that. And once we have that, like then we're off to the races. If we do it the other way around, where the entire job is installing Rust, then that's it. Our job will be install Rust and you're done, which we don't want to have. I'm like semi-convinced that it was the pools thing. It's confusing that it kind of breaks the whole thing there, but we can try it. The nice thing about syntax errors is that when they're wrong, like you don't have to wait for the entire build to happen again. You can just push it and it will immediately break. So you kind of prefer those errors. Remove. We remove that VM type that we specified there, which I really don't think we needed that. We can push it up again and see how fast this builds. And it should come here with like, it will pop down and say, you got another one. And then we can just press, show it to me. And it should show it. We'll see how well that works. Maybe it doesn't work at all. Okay, I'm getting impatient. Gonna hit refresh. Ha, didn't work that time, okay. Okay, yeah, we got further. And I think this was an error that was already in the other one, actually. So did not find expected. So line 5. Do we have to, when we're saying a job, I think it's like this, no? You know what would be a nice plugin would be like a VS Code plugin that looked at your Azure Pipelines YAML and basically ran syntax checking on it to make sure it fit some schema that it understood. That would be really nice. That would save me a bunch of headache. Anybody wants to build that, let me know. Hey, okay, cool. So now we're off to the races. We have gotten over our syntax hurdles, which I am very good at making mistakes when it comes to syntax. And now we're actually doing what we wanted to do, which is install Rust. And I'm going to assume, since this is, oh, there is one. There is one. So, okay, chat has just informed me that all my problems have been solved. I'm going to look this up. Azure Pipelines VS Code. I think this is my favorite part about VS Code, is that it's powerful like an IDE, but it's not like a traditional IDE, but it's not, you know, it's all kind of voluntary. So I don't get a bunch of junk that I don't care about. I can just install what I want. That feels really nice. So yeah, this VS Code extension brings syntax highlighting and auto completion. Oh, okay. Well, thank you, chat. And I think I've got the latest version of code, which means I don't have to. Yep. Oh, cool. And only one must be valid. I don't know what that means, but okay, that's cool. So we'll see if that helps out going forward. But I'm going to assume that yeah, it does. It passes. So we've got a passing build, which is awesome. That's really great. What that means now is that we can actually do real testing. And let's see what we wanted to do here. So I think we'll just kind of take this script, and we'll say, like, we've got another step here. And so we've used the template before. Thank you. Chat is congratulating me on getting the syntax of a YAML file correct, and I am feeling very good about that right now. So thank you. So our first step was a template, which was sort of an advanced feature, but we used it because it already existed, and that was nice. The more straightforward thing is to just kind of run a couple of like bash lines of a bash script, or maybe a PowerShell script if you're doing the Windows thing. So that's kind of what I think we'll be doing now, and I think you can just go ahead and write script like this. Although I've kind of been testing this out and never really came to a proper conclusion, but I'm pretty sure if you put bash like this, and then you run Windows, like if you're on the Windows VM, then instead of like by default using PowerShell, which it does, it will use bash, or by default it uses command.exe. But if you put bash there instead of script, it will like force it to use a bash script. I might be totally wrong with what I just said there, but that's what I think happens. So we're gonna try that, and then we can do it like this, where we just put that. We have to get rid of all these, but if we put that like pipe at the top or whatever, then we have a multi-line script here. Oops. And let's see, bad indentation. Does it need to be one more? The thing about YAML is like, where does the madness end? An inline script, yes it is. Okay, cool. So I think that works. Looking good here. Just again, like, very simple. We're gonna run cargo check, which just does type checking but doesn't build actual binaries because we don't care about the binary. And then cargo test runs all the tests and stuff like that. You can see we have this like -d warnings thing in this Rust flags environment variable. And if you do -D warnings, it denies all warnings. So if we have any warnings that are not traditionally errors, by doing that, like, those warnings will actually trigger an error and our whole build will fail. And I've been informed that indeed, if you use bash here, it will run git bash on Windows, which is awesome. So I like to do that. Like I've used PowerShell before, and I'm actually a fan of PowerShell, but it is nice to know, like, okay, I'm only gonna have to think in terms of bash here, and I don't, like, maybe if I were doing just Windows for whatever reason, my project was Windows only, I would do PowerShell instead. But because bash runs everywhere, and I know PowerShell runs everywhere too, maybe that works vice versa, but I'm just more used to bash nowadays. So that's kind of what I've been sticking to. Yeah, we can also give this a name, which I kind of like. I think it's display name. Yeah. Oh, that's nice. Did you see that? I just wrote DIS and then tab, and it worked. That was so cool. So giving it a display name means, like, when it shows up in the UI, and we'll see it in a minute, like, you can tell it, like, what is this thing actually doing? And obviously this is like multiple lines and stuff, so it's a bit complicated. So giving it a nice name kind of helps out when you're debugging and stuff. So I'll just do like run cargo check and test and call it like that. Yeah, and then like this should be good. We can go ahead and let's take a look again. Everything looks fine. And we'll go ahead and push this up. So actually do some testing. And then we can take a look and make sure, like, we didn't, now that we have the plugin, we can be pretty sure we didn't screw up the syntax, which is nice. So thanks again, chat, for helping me out there. And we can just kind of let it run, and hopefully it will pass. One thing I've noticed actually about pipelines that's really nice is, like, the startup times are pretty good. And especially for like the Ubuntu times are really good. You just saw it started up pretty quickly, but like Travis Ubuntu times were always really good. But like the Mac and Windows times were pretty slow, and especially Windows. Like, I mean, it was in preview, right? And I think it still is in preview, the Travis support for Windows. But it took a while. And like these projects, actually Windows was kind of the first platform that we developed for, because all of this originally came from a Windows only project. And so having like good Windows support has been really awesome. So definitely cool there. So I'm just going to assume that this will work. And if it doesn't work, then we can come back at some point. But I think like, if we take a look at the travis.yaml file, like we're basically almost there. We have a couple of things here. Like, we're actually only running this on Windows, surprisingly. This is why actually it may fail on, yeah, it will probably fail on this run, because it's not meant to run on Linux yet. We've only done Mac. Yeah, cool. It's failing because it's like, I'm running on Linux and I don't know how to do that. I'm curious why it's failing. Let's see here. Oh, yeah, no. So the way that this works, we can take a look at the code. This is a little bit, maybe, you know, if you're not in the Rust world, this might be a bit too much Rust, but so I apologize, but we'll just take a look real quick to see what's happening here. We're doing a bunch of what are called CFGs. This isn't it. It's inside of Druid shell. This Druid shell here is the part of Druid that is platform specific. The outer part is completely platform independent. It will work no matter where, as long as you're running, you know, the standard library. It will work. But here, inside of here, we've got some platform specific things going on, and you can see this CFG is basically a way of saying, like, compile this if the target OS is Windows, and compile this if the target OS is Mac OS. And you can notice, like, we got Windows, we got Mac OS, but Linux is nowhere to be found. So the unfortunate part is we're running this thing on Linux. None of this is getting compiled, and so when it actually looks for like WinAPI or obfc or whatever, when it's looking for these things, when it's trying to export these things, depending on which platform it's on, it won't be able to do it. It's just not going to be there, and we'll get errors. So we actually don't want it to run on Linux. We only want it to run on Windows. We can take a look at that at this migration thing here to see what it looks like when we're going from when we want to just say, hey, run on this one OS. All right. So let's see, we've got operating systems here. So you can see here, like, this is what we were doing before in our Travis YAML. You know, we had OS Windows here. Here instead, what we want to do is have basically just like this. And the interesting thing is, like, there's no kind of like built-in Linux support. Like, it's all based on these VM images, and so we're basically just going to associate, like, hey, the name, we'll start with Windows first. Hey, the name Windows here has a variable associated with it called image name, and that image name is this thing right here. Let's just try that and see how it goes. And the thing I was always, like, the thing I'm still sometimes confused about is, like, where to put these things. And I think the one complaint I have about the documentation is that it doesn't do a good job of saying, like, where you are. And I'm pretty sure here, like, I mean, we're already in steps. Like, I'm pretty sure we're in a job here. If chat knows what's going on, like, where we should be here, but I think we do it like this. Oh, it's not with me. We can get rid of these two for now, or rather, can we just comment it out? And I think we gotta go one more. Yeah. And then here, if we say pool, then we can do VM image, and then the image name. And I think with this, we're only going to run on Windows. Let's give it a try. And push that up and see what happens. How we doing, chat? Everybody feeling good? Is there any questions, any comments, anything like that? And we'll see here. So far, so good. Awesome. My hope is here that it's going to be running. Interesting. Hosted Ubuntu. That's strange. But then doesn't it seem like it's running on Windows? Yeah, it is, because now it's installing the Windows Rust, and this would indicate it's running on Windows and stuff like that. I'm confused by this UI that it says hosted Ubuntu here, unless it's running. No, that doesn't make any sense. Is it running a Windows VM on an Ubuntu machine? That would be strange. So that's kind of strange. Chat, if anybody knows what's going on there, let me know. It could be running, well, could it be running the WSL? No, because that's kind of the opposite, right? Like, that's running Linux on a Windows machine where everything that's happening here is Windows. Like all the Rust stuff, it thinks it's on Windows, it is on Windows. That's all good. It's just we're seeing up here pool hosted Ubuntu, which is strange. So it's kind of like the opposite. Like we seem to be running on an Ubuntu machine that is virtualizing Windows. That doesn't make much sense, but yeah. Interesting. Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what's going on. I guess I might have to do a bit more reading about what's going on there. We can definitely tell we're on Windows right now because installing Rust is much slower. This is a issue I think with installing actually Rust docs. For some reason on Windows it hangs a little bit. So it takes about twice as long to install on Windows than it does on Mac or Linux. That's not a pipelines issue, that's a Rust issue. And I think there's an open issue for it somewhere. But cool, we're gonna go down there and assume everything's good there. I think we're almost done, right? Like so we're not running nightly. That's another thing that we can go ahead and say. And of course we wanted to also run Mac OS. Running nightly is interesting too, because here they allow failures. They say just run nightly so we can see what it looks like, but if it fails, don't worry about it, kind of thing. That's also interesting. I think we'll skip that for now and just get Mac support working, and see what happens. So let's go in here. We're just gonna, oops, uncomment this out. Nope, too far. So then this should basically go ahead and run also for Mac OS inside of there. The only issue we're gonna run into here is that, like I said, on Windows, what Pete uses as its backend is Direct2D, and Direct2D is simply a Windows component. If you're on Windows past Windows, I think Windows 7 definitely, like the version that we need, you will have Direct2D if you're on Windows. So like there's no need to install anything there or anything like that. When we're running on Mac, we're not currently using Core Graphics, which would be the same story. Core Graphics comes with the OS, and like if we wanted to use Core Graphics, there would be no extra setup. But we don't have a Core Graphics backend. Instead, we're using Cairo, which, by the way, I can show you the Cairo homepage. And for a graphics library, it's a pretty retro looking homepage. When you're using Cairo, like that doesn't come installed on Mac OS, so you have to install it yourself. It's pretty easy to do that. We just have to use, well, it was easy on Travis, and I'm wondering if it will work on pipelines, because on Travis, what we're doing, and I don't have it here because it's in another branch. Let me pull it up. I have it already. This is something I added a couple of days ago. So I added to OS 10 here, and you can see, like, I'm just saying if the OS name is OS 10, then call brew update brew install Cairo. So Travis comes with brew. I'm not sure if Azure Pipelines does. Let's see, Azure Pipelines brew. Let's see what they have here. What's brewing? I guess there's a lot of what's brewing in. No, that's their Azure Pipelines. I mean, we can just try it and see what happens. But it doesn't look like, yeah, there's even, Homebrew 2.0 or whatever just came out, has, supports Linux now, which is interesting. It's quite brave of the Homebrew people, because package management on Linux is pretty well established, but it's cool. Yeah. No, this is the Azure CLI. Well, let's go ahead and try it. I imagine it won't work, and then we can kind of see what our options are from there. If we can do another step here and say bash, and let's just do bash brew. Oh, we got, yeah, brew. You should be able to change the agent pool under pipelines builds, edit agent pool. I don't know how it relates to the YAML definition though. Okay, so we figured out that, yeah, it seems like the agent pool is a, how does it even work then? How am I running an agent pool that's Linux, but I'm still running Windows? Are they really doing like an emulator then, or something? That's interesting. I don't know what's going on there. So we have brew install, and we got to do brew install Cairo, and then we can do something like this condition. And I got to look up the syntax again, but there's basically a way to say your condition can say, if this condition evaluates to true, run this thing, and if it doesn't evaluate to true, then don't run this thing. And basically what we want to do is say, run this thing if we're on Mac OS, and do not run it if we're on anything else, basically. And we do this inside of Tokyo. Let's see. Yeah, you can see here. We basically just want this. But of course, we don't want Windows NT. We got to find out what Azure Pipelines agent.os and see what it's called. It's probably Mac OS or OS 10 maybe. I think it's like variables are what they're called. Predefined variables. Let's see if we got an agent here. Darwin, if we want to know. So the kernel inside of Mac OS is called Darwin, so I think that's what they're going with. The agent pool defined in the UI usually will define what it runs on for non-YAML build. I'm assuming that the YAML can override this definition for non-UI driven pipelines. Interesting. Strange that they still show it in the UI. It's kind of confusing, but oh well. Okay. You know what we're gonna do? Like, we'll put this first here so that if it fails fast, and we don't have to like install Rust there. And in fact, actually what we can do is literally just comment this out so we don't even have to worry about Windows. See if it goes faster. So let's see, try the brew. I have the best commit messages, as you can tell. All right. Yeah, and as far as like a time check, like I think what I would like to do is just kind of get this working, get Druid working. So maybe another 15 minutes and then call it a day for today. Like I said, today's mostly just like a stream check and stuff like that. But I would love to hear from the chat as well, like what you liked about the stream today. I'm not exactly sure why you joined. Maybe a lot of you are coworkers of mine, so thank you to the coworkers. for joining. But if you're not a coworker, like, why did you decide to join? What were you interested in? Was it more Rust stuff, or was it pipeline stuff? I hope to be doing kind of a mix of Azure related stuff and Rust stuff, and of course where they overlap. You like the way I presented everything? Oh, thank you. That's very nice of you. And it looks like Homebrew exists. Cool. Oh, joy. This is great. Okay. So like we should be good to go. Yeah, and it's installing Cairo now with all of Cairo's dependencies and stuff, which is super awesome. So good job, Pipelines, for making that as easy as Travis did. That was very nice. Cool. What that means then is that if we do this, we're basically done translating this Travis YAML. The last thing that we have to figure out to do is basically have nightly in there as well. And this is I think this is maybe too big of a question for us to answer today, so maybe we cut it short, because yeah, like I said, I really only wanted to go 10 more minutes, but we have to decide, I think, how we want to do multiple OSs. We want to do Windows and Mac and eventually Linux. And we want to also do stable and nightly Rust, and maybe eventually beta Rust or some, minimum version of Rust, like Rust 1.2.6 or something like that is the minimum version we want to support. And so like we have to figure out how we want those things to overlap. We probably wanted to run the OS and then like the OS and stable, and then maybe nightly only once, just to check that everything's good, but I'm not sure. So if the chat has any thoughts on that, let me know. I can just quickly, for everybody's edification, show you what allow failures, like the equivalent is, because it's quite simple on Azure Pipelines. Basically, in order to allow failures, we do it over here as well. I believe it's called continue. No, is it not? I thought it was continue on error. Azure Pipelines continue on error. I believe. I believe basically your step or your entire job, you can just say continue on error. Apparently it's not continue on error, although I thought it was. But there's just like one little line that you have to put in, and it will basically, if the thing fails, it will just report it, but it will continue to build, and your test can still pass, even if you had a spurious failure in there. We were doing it in here somewhere, but I don't see it now. Yeah, but let's call it there. Chad, if there are any last questions or thoughts, let me know. Like I said, I appreciate it. I think next week I'll probably do another stream. We got the chat said, I skimmed the docs on this and got it straight in my head. One agent pool can have multiple images. So despite having an agent pool named Ubuntu, it likely has the same VM images as the Microsoft hosted agent pool, which has 6 different VM images. Interesting. So it is, okay. So they are running VMs. Well, I mean, of course they're running VMs, but why would the pool be named Ubuntu? What about the pool makes it Ubuntu or Microsoft? Like, what is Microsoft hosted versus Ubuntu? That's what's confusing about it. Interesting. well, something to look into. So yeah, chat was saying there's probably something carried over from the non YAML days. Well, you can still use pipelines without YAML. Yeah, it's very strange. Anyway, so yeah, thanks so much for joining. And next week, like I said, we're going to be doing probably more Rust related stuff. But if you have any thoughts or whatever on what I should stream next, let me know on Twitter at Ryan_Levick. And hopefully I'll see you next time. So thanks everybody. Have a good evening, morning, or afternoon, wherever you are. See you around.